this is Bob from Hobbyconcepts back with part 5, I can hardly believe it, of my Tamiya Volvo FH16 tow truck build. Today is all about programming. We're going to program the DX6e radio. We'll go through that step by step. We're going to work on the Tamiya MFC-03 system with its amazing special effects. And this is all about the programming, setting up of that unit. Not going to do a lot of building on the tow truck. This also works for a lot of the other Tamiya trucks that use this equipment. Stay tuned till the very end because I have a sound effect that's built into this unit that's not in the instructions that's really pretty cool. So let's get started. Well, this video I'm going to concentrate on the MFC control unit and this DX6e radio and how to set this equipment up. If you have never done it before, it's a little bit intimidating, but it's really not that hard when you get right into it. I've got this brand new Spektrum DX6e radio, and one of the cool things about it is it's got this new AR620 receiver with no antennas. It's very small, super easy to mount. You don't have to worry about anything, and that's kind of a cool feature. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what comes in this MFC-03 box. You get the MFC unit, which is a multifunction unit. It comes with this piece of clear plastic protective tape over it. And I want to make sure you know you need to take that off because there's some vent holes here. So that's the MFC unit. Provides for all kinds of features. There's a box in here that's got your control box, speaker, those are the two main components, and then a lot of the small parts and a ton, just a ton of wiring and plugins. Like I said, very intimidating when you first look at it, but we're going to go through it and show you it's not that hard. Inside the box, you've got the instructions, and they look super intimidating. But you got to realize they're in several languages, so when you start hunting just for your language, it cuts a lot of it out. And I'm going to go through these a little bit later. And then the back half of the instructions is how to install the MFC in some of the Tamiya trucks. Now, most of the MFC instructions are in the Volvo instructions. And then finally, there's labeling stickers for the wiring, and several trees of plastic parts, almost all of which we're not going to use in the Volvo truck because all the specialty pieces come with the truck. Alright, the first thing I want to talk about is the Spektrum DX6e radio. It's 6 channels, computer radio, and Tamiya basically says you can't use a radio with electronic trims on their trucks, but that's not the case. I'm going to show you how to program it so that works. The really cool thing about this radio is you need to have a left stick that's self-centered, like this. And almost all radios have a stick that's on a slider because that would be your throttle for a model airplane. The Spektrum has this amazing feature. You open this up, pull this little locking tab out, flip that switch so it says center, and now we have a self-centering stick. The really neat thing about that is you can use this radio on an airplane and then use it on your truck too by just flipping that switch. Most radios you have to take them apart and do a bunch of work. So let me show you how to set this radio up. I'm going to zoom in on the screen a little bit. So I'm going to take just a minute to go over this radio. It actually has 2 sets of menus. One menu you access by just pushing this switch, and then you can scroll up and down by rolling it and push to select. The other menu, we'll shut it back off. You have to hold that to shut it off. If you hold this down and then turn the radio on, keep holding that down, it comes up with a different menu. And the first thing I'm going to do is the model name. Oh, model type, I want model name. There we go. And so we're going to call this Volvo. So we just go through here, V, and we're going to go on and so forth and select that. So I've got Volvo FH16. We'll roll back to the back to the main. And now we have Volvo FH16 in here. And so now it's time to program this radio, and I want to just kind of show you the theory. So when Tamiya, this equipment's been around for quite a while. When Tamiya designed it, radios had trims that were just sliders like this. And actually most of the radios were 4 channels, so Tamiya was designing radios to get extra functions out of a switch. So our steering is here, and that's the same on both radios. And then you would move this up for horn, down for longhorn. Then you would slide the trim, and now it would do a completely different function, like flip through the lights, turn the flashers off, turn them on, back to the horn. So the trim actually gave this one stick multi-functions, and the same with the trim on this side for this stick. Well, in these newer computer radios, the trims are digital. It's a little button, and you have to hold it, and it moves the trim, but it takes a long time. So what we're going to do is we're going to program this radio so to basically fool it. So when we move this, it does one function. Flip this dual rate switch, and now it does the other functions. Actually, it's simpler than the sliding trim system, and you can use a radio that has a lot more channels. The Tamiya radio with sliding trims that they still sell is only 4 channels, and this is 6, so we can get a couple extra functions. But that's the theory of why this works. Okay, time to program this radio. It's actually quite simple. Push the roller, scroll down to dual rate. Now we want this channel here to have a dual rate function, and this channel here to have a dual rate function. This would be the elevator channel. So we go here, click elevator, flip down to where it says switch, and we're going to select switch C. There's a little letter C right here, so that's switch C. Then with the switch in the up position, we're going to roll this back to 75%, and then we're going to save it. So that means when this is moved up here, it goes 75% of the way. We flip that down, it goes 100% of the way, which is the same effect as moving the trim. We're going to do that again for this channel, which would be the rudder channel. Flip rudder, switch C, 75%, 100% in the down position, that's good. And save it. Now if we scroll all the way down here to the bottom, there's a monitor function. So we can take a look at this, and here's our elevator, and you can see this little bar going up and down. It says 75 and 74. Okay, but if we flip the switch, it switches to 100, back to 75. Same thing with this one, 75. Flip the switch, goes to 100. So we've got it programmed correctly. We'll go back up to the main, and now our radio is ready to use with the MFC. So I'm going to do a little prep work here, and then I'm going to hook this to some lights and show you how this works with the radio. One final setup thing we need to do is reverse a couple of the channels. To do that, we go into the menu, go to the servo setup, put it on travel, push the button, and click until we hit reverse. We need to reverse the throttle. Yes. And the elevator. Okay, so that's all the transmitter setups. Well, one of the things for prepping is this little control box. There's 2 screws that hold the bottom on, and you need to take it apart because all of this wiring is, it looks pretty complex, but there's two different types of wiring. There's wiring that has lights and wiring that doesn't have lights. Okay, the wiring that doesn't have lights, then there's these cables here with lights. There's one with a switch. Here's another one with no lights. So we've got these three here with no lights, and they have to attach to the back of this MFC control panel, and we have to put this sticker on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you can see I've got my sticker on, I've got my cables plugged in. All the cables are a different size, so no worries about which cable goes where, and then the box just screws back together. And then these cables plug into the MFC, and again, the cables are different sizes. One plugs in here, one plugs in here, one plugs in here. I'll go ahead and plug those in and come back. So I plugged in these three wires to the MFC, and it's going to start to look like a wiring nightmare. That's why I want to go through it one step at a time, but that's pretty simple. These are just plugged in. And now it's time to plug in these leads to the receiver. Now, since we're using a Spektrum receiver, there's a little tab here that we have to cut off. These plugs will not fit in a Spektrum receiver without that tab. So we'll have to cut all those off, and then I'll show you where they go. So I've cut the tabs off of these, and they're ready to plug in. Now, I've created a programming and plug-in sheet for the DX6e, and it includes where all these plug in. You can get this free. Just email me. My email's in the description. So plug J4 into the aileron channel, which is 2. So we grab J4 and we plug it into space 2. Now, you're never going to see it on the video, but this is marked minus plus cents across the top. So minus is always the black or the brown wire. And now the next one, J5, plugs into channel 1. Okay. J6 plugs into channel 3. And then J7 plugs into channel 4. Now notice there's no order. You can't plug these in order. You have to get them into the right slot. So we've got our box plugged in, our receiver plugged in. I'm going to do some lights. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in the instructions for the Globetrotter to actually steps 97 and 100. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to put some LEDs in these holders so when I hook everything up, they aren't laying all over the table. So a couple little tricks here. It gets real tricky and you have to read the instructions several times. But what they want is here we're looking at J17, J22, J13, and J17. Okay, so you go, okay, what are those? Now, you go to the MFC instructions, and here's the numbers. So we'll take this one first. J17, actually it's J14 for the MFC-03. J14 for the MFC-03. We go here to J14, it's white, white, black. So if you look through all these lights, they're all color-coded. So here's the white and the black. And we're going to go through, you notice there's probably a couple of them, that's right. And there are 2 bulbs on each one. So that one goes in the very bottom hole, right there. 1 on each side. Okay, now the instructions also say, boy, you really got to read these close. Separately sold LED is required when using J14 on the MFC-01. When using J17 on the MFC-03, employ the included J18 LEDs. So we have to go back here to J18, white, white, and blue, and so there's a set of those. I'm going to go ahead and install these headlights and I'll show you what we wind up with. One other thing that's worth noting is, even though this is a 5mm LED, Tamiya has a little tiny opening here. And I'm going to paint this as a fire department New York tow truck. So I want a lot of lights. So you can see on this one I drilled this out and drilled this one out slightly larger to allow more light to come out. And I do that sometimes. The Grand Hauler is notorious for that. I extended the wiring and installed the lights and changed the bulbs in that rear wiring. I extended it 8 inches. It was actually a pretty good job to do it because of the bulb changes. You can buy pre-done wiring harnesses that are longer with the smaller size bulbs. I checked several places, but it looks like the best place to buy them is directly from Tamiya USA. Other countries, I'm not sure, but anyway, they do offer these, and the part numbers are in the kit. So I've extended the wires and mounted the bulbs per the instructions. I put a few tie wraps on these just to neaten up the wiring while I plug stuff in. There's the headlights. And I've got a couple of servos here just for testing. And then I've got a battery here and my speaker. So the speaker just plugs in here to a speaker port. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug these wires in and I'll come back. So I've got the MFC all plugged in, and I want to kind of go through what I did, and then we'll go through a little operation. So, of course, originally we plugged in the box, and that's no problem. I've plugged in just the backup lights for my reverse lights, just for demonstration purposes. The receiver, of course, we have plugged in. Now, I plugged in a shift servo, and that goes to position 6 on this receiver, and we're going to use this 3-position switch for shifting. I've plugged in a couple of headlights. I've plugged in the fog lights and the headlights, and I plugged in a couple of turn signals so that we would be able to see how those work. And then I plugged in a simulated steering servo, which plugs into the upper servo block here, and the brown wire goes out. I also plugged in this jumper to J12 because in the, and I honestly have never used a jumper in there before, but they tell you in the Volvo instructions to put a jumper in J12, so I did like the instructions said. So now we can fire this up. I've got a battery hooked up, and I plugged in my speaker, so I can turn my radio on. And then this little 3-position switch needs to be in the metal position. We'll turn it on, and we'll hear some sounds. And that clicking sound was the diesel igniter. So now it's ready to start. So if I pull this down a little bit, I get a attempting to start sound. If I pull it down all the way, I've got volume here. Okay, so now we're ready to run. But before we're completely ready, we need to map this to the unit. So to do that, we push this little button down, and you'll hear this thing shut off. And then you go on the left stick, up to down, right to left, up to down, right to left, and then push the button again. And what that does is that tells the MFC the position of the radio sticks, and it remembers them. So now we're ready to go. So steering works fine. Okay. If you want turn signals, you flip this down and then steer. Okay. Without flipping it down, you don't get turn signals. So if you're driving on the open road where you wouldn't want turn signals, you don't have them. Horn is up. We can change the horn sound by flipping this switch down, pulling that over. Whoop. So that switches our horn sound. If we pull this down, now this becomes our emergency flasher switch. Put it up again to turn it off. Okay, and if we pull it down, it flips through, and there's those bottom lights where I drilled that hole out a little bigger. It flips through the various levels of lighting. Now also there's an engine shutoff, so you can remotely shut down the engine. You can do it again, and you'll hear the original start up, and then we can do our engine start remotely. Throttle. Now as a safety feature, you have to pull it down twice, and then you can see our backup light. Forward. Twice. Backup light. And that's some of the basic features of this unit. Now, there's more features and more lights. I'm going to go through those as I build the truck, but I wanted to kind of give a quick overview of this system. So now I'm going to install this in the truck and hook up the steering servo and the throttle, and we'll see how that looks. So moving back to the FH16 instructions, the next step is to mount the MFC in this vibration motor. And I assembled it just so you can see what it looks like. Exactly what it sounds like. It's a motor that vibrates the truck. I'm not too hot on these. I disconnect them in my own trucks because they tend to vibrate things apart, but the effect does look pretty cool. So I'll mount the screws here, and then I'll go ahead and mount it into the truck. I mounted the vibration motor. I mounted this with a piece of double stick tape. You can see I left the receiver connected. My steering servo now plugs into the MFC unit, and these two wires here plug into the motor, and I'll route those underneath here, and the vibration unit plugs into the MFC unit. So, and this doesn't mount until later. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up those wires and we'll see what we got. Well, looking at the front of the truck, I plugged in the motor wires. They give you these two pins here to wrap extra wiring around. I'm going to pull the shifting lead up from here, and I'll attach these back here later. And then I'll plug the shifting lead into channel 6 on the receiver. And that pretty much gives us our basics all hooked up. I know not everything's installed, but I'm going to go ahead and hook up a battery and kind of test everything. Well, I've got everything plugged in, so let's give it a test. I put a battery in, plug that in. So we'll turn it on here. We should have it start up. Okay, steering. Well, left is left and right is right. That looks pretty good. Horn still works. I did not plug in the vibration motor yet. Let's take a look and see if it runs here. Now there's forward, second gear, third gear, second gear, low gear. reverse. Okay, I have not plugged in the boom motor yet, but it looks like the basics are all working. Well, our next step is the body. And this is a really good place to stop. There's what our body's going to look like to start with. But before I go, I want to show just one more cool feature that probably a lot of people aren't aware of. We'll turn our radio on. And if you hold the stick down and right when you turn the unit on, we'll hear sound effects of a guy walking up to the truck, opening the door, putting the key in the ignition. So let's try that out. Another cool feature is if you hold this stick down, you can rev the engine without the truck moving. And finally, since we did the sound effect of the guy walking up to the truck, when we turn it off, we'll hear him walk away. Okay, well that's going to end part 5. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe. Please give me a thumbs up. Hey, check out the Tamiya Facebook group, Tamiya Truck Open Studio. Lots of links in the description. I'll be back pretty soon with part 6, which will be the body work and the painting. This is just a fabulous machine, and I am really pleased with how it's turning out. So everybody, thanks again for watching.